Good morning. Thoughts on DBA? Let's take a peek. No, it's far too thin, dude. I mean, it's a really nice base, and it looks like I'm assuming this is an ETF, right? Probably trade ETFs that are a little bit faster too. I don't know what about DBA would attract you, but it moves 0.7% per day. Just no good. Oh, you meant DBC. It also moves 0.7%, which is also pretty horrible. I don't know that they need a deeper pullback, but sideways is good. Sideways is healthy. Yeah, I think MSTR and time ends up lower. So long as it's below the 200 simple moving average, I'm really not thinking about it too much. Personal income data this morning. Personal income, PCE, core PCE. You're having a hard time getting off the screens? After 3 o'clock, get off your screens. Is there things I disagree with Christian on? No, not a ton. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. I still think Rocket Lab's a buy candidate. But yeah, I got stopped out yesterday. And I could look to rebuy it back. But for now, I'm out. Got stopped out of a few names yesterday. I also got stopped out of SYM. So yeah, that one was acting fairly poor. Jordan, this is a good question. So after entering a stock and there's maybe one up day and then 2 down days that are significant, would you consider? So I'm assuming if there's an up day that you bought it and then immediately 2 down days, you've been stopped out already below the low of day of the day that you bought it. So yeah, you'd be out. You're still an MP? Very nice. Yeah, I'm in there as well. Yeah. When I scan for 1 month stock gainers, do you want the same to appear on the 3 month scan before buying? No, not necessarily. 1 month is fine if they've got a clean technical setup. And then you dig a little bit further, and maybe there's a few names within that same group that are also acting well. That's all you really need. You just want to know that money is going to a particular sector. Do I look into historical performance of a stock before deciding which ascending moving average is your? So not necessarily, but when a stock is going up, it tends to respect, call it the 20-day or the 50-day. But if a stock is, just broke out of a stage one base or a really nice base, normally that first test of the 50 simple moving average is buyable. My insight on ZEP, yeah, there's no setup here. There's no setup. This thing needs to go build a much longer sideways base. This thing just went from, it's up like 1,500% in less than 3 trading months. There's no buy there. Could it keep going higher? That's fine, but stocks that go up that much need much longer bases. And I could be wrong about that, but I wouldn't put myself in that position. PGY may be buyable off the 50. I don't see anything wrong with it. Super liquid, plenty fast. It's got to hold that 50 though, but looks fine. This one, something about it not as nice. It was a whole lot nicer right in here. Yeah, I don't know if that's what people are running crude oil up for, or maybe call it nat gas, but they are acting really well. So at least not for now. Do I buy breakouts only if the deck is above its 10 SMA? No, not necessarily. I was buying breakouts in, well, I guess the NASDAQ was above its 10, but it was still below its 200 late April. I didn't make up my sell rules. I just took what I thought the best parts of from everybody else that I learned from. There's no need to reinvent anything. How did I develop them? I found the people who, talk about trading who have had decades long of longevity, and I would listen to what they were saying. I would study it on the charts as well, and then through just years of repetition of my own trading, you realize like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and that works for me, and that fits my personality. And you just the more you trade, the more things begin to make sense. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it. And then you just, listen to what they say, and, you'll hear, stocks move in momentum bursts, and, I want to get paid a little bit into that. And then stocks, can make big moves. And when you look at a stock like ANF, and it can respect its 50-day for a long time, and then you realize like, okay, yeah, I want to figure out a way to get into that. And so, yeah, you just figure out ways that work for you. But, you're not just going to like totally steal somebody's rules and then without ever having implemented them, and then tried to tweak them a little bit for what fits your personality until, you've got a couple hundred trades under your belt. I like some oil and gas names. I tweeted about them yesterday. Yeah, they look pretty damn good. I don't know that any of them are buyable at the moment, but they look good. How do I use market? I don't. Like, could I tell that there's not a ton of stocks participating? Yes. Does that give me a little bit of caution? Sure. But I don't really, market breadth doesn't do anything for me, right? I'm focused on the leaders anyway. The leaders tend to be going up despite, what the market may or may not be doing in terms of breadth, right? The breadth hasn't been so great lately, right? We've had more decliners over advancers recently, and I'm still sitting in Tesla, right? So it's like I'm still sitting in MP, I'm still sitting in ARC, right? So it's like things that are just kind of trending and tracking higher just continue to trend and track higher until they don't. And then you have to have some sell rules to get you out of the way. Why would you want to swing long on the indexes? They're so slow. Like if you're trading maybe the futures markets, fine, but I don't see a reason to be getting a swing long on QQQ and SPY. That's like if you'd only do that if you're dollar, and no, you wouldn't even do that. A swing long, it'd be one thing if you said I'm trying to dollar cost average into the S&P 500. Then it doesn't matter what price it's at. You just do your dollar cost averaging for the next 20 years. But if you're trying to get a swing long on the Qs and the SPY, you hate your money. Or you have yet to study how, leading stocks move. My thoughts are that you shouldn't try to buy a swing long on the Qs or the SPY unless you really dislike your money. If you want it to grow, that's not the way. Core weave. Yeah, still sloppy though. I don't really see a setup here just yet. Yeah, I saw FSLR yesterday. Yeah, this one caught my attention. But this one's been on my radar for a while. I just haven't seen a spot to get long in this. Right? Like when I see this, there's just nowhere to buy that, right? Like I look at the daily and I go, okay, where's my tight spot? Where's my tight spot? Where's my tight spot? Like, am I just going to buy it against the ascending 20? Sure. But, I'm looking for like a base. And this thing's not really basing. It's just kind of channeling up the 20, which is fine. But I just can't get into that. I like to buy reclaims as it's turning back up through the moving average, but on a 5-minute chart and just using a 620 setup. How did I study Christian? I watched all his live streams, literally every single one of them. I watched all of them. I picked up on all the golden nuggets that he would say, because nothing that he's really saying is wrong, right? It's like, he's had tons of success. So it's like, okay, he's had tons of success. Like, what is he literally saying? And he would always be saying, you're focused on stocks with high ADR. You're focused on stocks with a good group, with a catalyst, right? In an uptrending market. I mean, he would say these things. And then a lot of people still tend to do the opposite. His stops would be at low of day, right? He would take 10% positions for the most part, sometimes a little bit more if he felt the situation was a big situation that he could take advantage of. So I literally watched every single one of his streams. I mean, he's effectively giving you a guideline on how to trade from someone who's had a bunch of success. Yeah, I'm waiting on exactly that 232 level. Do I still consider Sim? I mean, they got a downgrade, and that action kind of sucked in the morning, so I had to stop out. But I don't hate it. If we're going to be living above the 50 simple, I just don't see a spot, unfortunately, to rebuy it, which is what matters. How would you go about deciding the pivot? Well, I personally like flat pivots, right? Because everybody can see them, right? So something like ARC, for instance, down here, right? A nice flat pivot, horizontal pivot. Everybody can see the break over the pivot, hence the volume, right? And it's the same thing up here. Nice flat pivot. Everybody can see the flat pivot. That's my favorite. No, this is just up there, right? This is just, you recently had, obviously big volatility, but it held the 50. It's tightening back up. This basically has a flat pivot. But yeah, there's just something about it. It's just up so much, right? It's up from $2 all, to 13. It's up, not up that much, I guess, but I don't know. Yeah, Stock B's great. I did Stock B's boot camp back in the day too. I did Stock B's boot camp. I was in Minervini Private Access, Pat Walker's room, Dan Zanger's room, watched all of Christian, spent time, and still am in IU. I mean, so there's just there's a lot of good places. You just have to make sure you're curating, the things that you're learning from the right people. If you start learning from random folks, then it's going to be tough. Like, you have to take to face value what it is they're actually saying. And then if you've seen that thing that they're saying in the market over and over and over, and you're like, okay, yeah, what he's saying makes sense, right? There's a lot of people out there who just say a bunch of random shit, and it doesn't register with what you've actually seen take place in the market. Then Etsy setting up. Let's take a peek. I don't see a setup here. It's 200 days flat. We're in a super strong bull market, and this 200 days not even trending up. I'm in iron on the short side. I like that little gap down overnight too. That was nice. So got about $1.50 gap down overnight. We'll see if this thing can stay heavy today. But I am short iron, and as long as we don't break 50, I'm going to still be short. So thoughts on WFRD? I like Weatherford. It looks a lot like these other energy names as well. Looks a lot like all the others. Yeah. I mean, Hassan, that is exactly how it works, right? It lessens risk for the pullback. It puts your mind at ease because that trade is done. Like, once I pay myself into that strength, for the most part, that trade is done, right? I don't think about it too much more after that. I just let it work on the ascending moving average. It means price is getting tight. It means moving averages are coming up underneath price. We're not very extended from those moving averages. That's what I mean. Right. And what I mean by tight is something has to have undergone expansion. It goes up, then it goes sideways. Right. And that allows price to get tight. It doesn't have to be super tight against moving averages. That's not always necessary. But price itself can just be getting tight. Royal Gold. Yeah, these things have been super strong. I don't know that I see, a spot for it. I would just be, keep your eyes on gold. But some of these names have made such massive moves, like NEM. This is going to be your leader. So keep your eye on that. Obviously, AEM, WPM, KGC, HL, CDE, GFI. They're all acting really well. So, do I manually track themes by knowing what individual companies are doing, or is there another way? Yeah, you could fin visit. You can look up, sectors effectively, and you could see their 1 month, 3 month, 6 month performance. And you want to be, kind of keeping your attention on the ones that are in the top half of that whole list. And I would say focus on the, top 30 or 30 groups on that list. And, you can go through them. You could even set filters for making sure that the stocks are above the 200. You could set fundamental filters, making sure that they've got good earnings and sales, accelerating earnings and sales quarter over quarter. And, you just make your scan based off of that in stocks that are in leading themes, leading groups over, call it 6 months, and then start to go through the list, which are actually tight and they've got good earnings and sales. It doesn't have necessarily themes, but it's got sectors, and sectors are your themes, right? If a bunch of uranium names are going, that's a theme, right? If a bunch of software application stocks are going, that's the theme. TBBK moves 2.8% per day. This is not that great. How do I feel about Amazon near the 200? I'd like to see it hold the 200, but there's no, there's no entry on this name. No setup, unless you really like turtles. How to find Christian? What's his full name? You can find him under Kulamagi, Qullamagie. You can find him like that on X, or you could find him like that on YouTube. And he's everywhere. Kulamagi. If you guys don't know who that is, you have lots of hours of video to watch. Run, not bad. I think, there's a few better ones, right? FSLR, I think, is better. This one's more liquid, but also DQ's been acting really well. A little less liquid. I mean, new high in the formation, run is not. So core looks like it's turning back up on the weekly. We'll see what happens when it gets over 1250. You're an intraday trader yourself? Yeah. So I had huge success in 20 and 2021. In particular, in 2021, like that's actually the 30K to 100K was fine, but starting 21, it went from 100K to over 3 million. And part of the reason for that explosive growth was because of the market we were in, right? I wasn't some genius. I was like still getting my training wheels on, right? I was like 8 months into trading, less. And what started to happen at the start of 21 was the market was on fire, and I was trading what was called sympathy plays, right? You had so many days where you would have like 100%, 200%, 300% runner. And I figured out quickly that stocks would move in like little baskets. Like I'm sure those of you guys who traded in 21 remember like TCAT, and TCAT ended up going from like 7 to 70 over like the course of a week. Well, all of a sudden I realized like DLPN was running with it. So like anytime I'd notice TCAT running, I would literally start to go and hammer DLPN, knowing that that's where traders would go next. And I was just doing that with bigger and bigger and bigger size. And my win rate was insane, right? I'd have like a super, super high win rate. It's kind of like today, in a way, where like if Oklow's going crazy, you also know that like you're going to get some bids into NNE and SMR, right? If IONQ's going up, Rigetti and QUBT and QBTS would be following. Well, it was even more pronounced in 2020 and 2021. Like sympathy plays were just moving that much crazier. There was just tons of participants. Everybody was at home, and like it was one of the hottest markets ever. Like this has been a really nice trend market, but that was a really nice day trading market. So I just took advantage of the environment that I was in without even really knowing too much of what I was doing. And I was just doing it every single day with more and more size until, my broker didn't like how many market orders I was taking, and I got the boot. Well, it's funny. I am actually going to play golf. I'll be flying off to Michigan today. Yeah. I mean, look, the market might just chop here. I have no idea. Typically when you get two nice washout days followed by a gap down and then a nice little rally all day long, that can tend to be the start of a reversal, at least the start of that could be the bottom of this pullback. And then you consolidate for a few weeks and then you can continue higher, something like that, consolidate for even 10 days. But I don't know, right? I don't really know what's going to happen. My job is just to try to execute low risk setups on the side of the market that I think is working best. For me recently, I've been getting traction on the short side. SNDK, IRON, IONQ. Three of those were very extended stocks. I thought they would play out a little bit more like ALAB and BE. So Yeah. Spotify, nice flat pivot. We'll see if it can get going over that. I look at QQQE and RSP, but that's equal weight, right? That's not necessarily breadth. That's just equal weight. That's just knowing if like money is going to the other components of the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, which I guess, would be an expansion of breadth if QQQ. I mean, I suppose you could look at it that way. Yeah, but I don't concern myself with that. We don't see, the thing is we don't know when those seasons are going to be. Like, we don't know when it's going to be a strong period or a weak period. The only thing that makes it a strong period is if there's a participation of a lot of stocks, right? And there's a lot of clean setups that are following through. I don't know when that's going to happen. It's not like we like, oh, yep, let's just scrap September. September's terrible. September's been really damn good, actually. So I kept hearing about how seasonally weak September is, and it's been an incredible month. Mm, Dave is fine. Dave is cool. It's got to clear this little flat base. Affirm. Maybe if we undercut and rally back through the 50. Yeah, on the 50 is good for Affirm. Maybe has to hold that level. Yeah, I don't know, like, Fernando, if like a particular months are going to be good or bad. Your job is to do your job is to do your job every night. Scan the market. Where's money going? Where's money leaving? What are my clean technical setups? Those technical setups, what are they in any of the leading groups? You know, do they have good fundamentals? Like, a reason for an institution to buy them? How's the underlying environment? Right? And then what's your entry tactic when you go to buy it? Like, there's a checklist of things that you're supposed to do every single night, right? So that you can be prepared for the next day. Do you have particular advice on how to scan for ascending, sloping, up moving averages? Yes, I do. Focus on stocks and leading groups that are in the 1 and 3 and 6 month relative strength scan. If you do that, then you're looking at stocks that are in uptrends. Yeah, Max, AMD's got to get back over the 50 simple moving average itself. Not at the moment unless, we start to act a little bit weaker. I basically have a $48 average on this thing. So I actually did a pretty nutty job. And I thought, I didn't think I nailed the top, but this day here, I literally shorted this candlestick. And then I rolled over and I was like, holy shit. I was like, did I just nail that? As it was basically going parabolic into that level. And then I was like, okay, but I'm using 50 as my stop just in case. And, you know, almost stopped me out. But yeah, we'll see. I would look to add to it if it's acting fairly weak. And really, in particular, if these other stocks within the group are acting poor. So if Riot, Hut, Cypher, are also coming down, APLD. Yeah, I talked about Run. It's not bad. Run's not bad. I prefer FSLR. I just don't see a setup. Well, my short entry for iron was simple. I thought it was just a parabolic move. I was watching the tape speed up in that $48 level, but I didn't know. Like, I thought it could potentially just kind of play out as, like BE, right? Where you get this super big run up and then eventually you just get a little gap down and then you start to act heavy from there. And like today, we're getting that gap down, right? So we're going to have a little gap down today. And if we start to break yesterday's lows, everybody who's bought these last 2 days will be underwater. So hopefully, they'll start to wash out some. But it was just kind of thinking of it like BE, right? Like things can only go vertical before having to cool down. You can only stretch a rubber band so far. And like even when I got into iron, I knew where I wanted my stop to be, which was $50. So I was basically sizing according to, the loss I was willing to take if it went up to 50. It's a little bit different than like shorting an MSTR, which is, this thing is retesting your 50-day from underneath, and then you're basically shorting it, as it's rolling over at the 50, right? That's a little bit different. So one's kind of like, and it really wasn't like this parabolic blow off extension. We haven't like really been getting those. Like look at Open Door, and maybe Open Door still got further to go, but Open Door didn't really give like a parabolic extension. A-Lab didn't really give a parabolic extension. BE didn't really give like those gap ups. Oklo really didn't give like those parabolic gap up exhaustion candles, right? Like this thing all of a sudden just made a big move up, digested, made another move up, and then kind of nasty pullback. BE again just never really gave those exhaustion gap ups. Versus if you like looked at an MSTR, towards the highs you started to get like these pretty insane, and I shorted this one as well on this day. You started to get this like very big speed up after an already big move on increasing volume and subtle gap ups overnight. Like here was a gap up, and then again you had a gap up going on overnight as well before the ultimate fail. So it's like you had these little exhaustion gaps. Weren't really getting that like on an iron. You were just kind of grinding higher. Yeah, I like they're a lithium company, Albemarle or Albemarle or whatever. Yeah, not bad. No, SATS, I just don't like it up here. Too extended from the 50. I just don't like it. Yeah, super tight in price, but it's like got so much airspace down to the 50. I don't buy stocks that extended from the 50. Yeah, SQQQ. Yeah, or the Sox S, something like that. Yeah, I basically have a $48 average on iron. So we'll see if it goes on to work, but you mean themes like quantum? Yeah, no, they don't track them like that. They track them by what's called industry group. But that doesn't matter, right? You need to just track your industry groups. You don't need to worry so much about them bundling it up in a neat little package for you. That's where you got to scan the market, right? You'll notice that things move together. Like when iron moved, so did IONQ and so did QBTS. Like your job is to scan the market and be like, okay, these things move together. You've never been in any of the paid rooms groups. You're a self-learner and you believe you learned a lot by experiencing/losing. Do you think the ones you were involved give more than free? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like professionals, even myself included, like they value like Christian might be the only one where if you just listen to him, but it wasn't a course, right? Like even with like Christian, if you asked him a question, there was no guarantee that he would answer you. But like if you pay for a room with like Dan Zanger or Pat Walker or Mark Minervini, right? You'd be able to ask them basically a question and eventually expect an answer, right? So, being in like some whatever room where there's you think you're just going to go into a room with a bunch of professionals who make a ton of money and think they're just going to answer your question for free, right? Only Christian would do that. And again, there was no guarantee that your question would ever get answered because he's got 5,000 plus people watching, 10,000 plus people. He can't possibly answer all your questions. But if you're paying for a room like with Pradeep or with Dan Zanger or with Pat Walker or with like, even in my Discord, you've normally you have that person's attention. You're paying them. So yeah, paid rooms. Now, does anybody need them? I don't think so. I don't think people need them, right? If they are self learners and can put in that work. But if you still need some guidance of like how to do things a little bit better, um, some people really like trading pods, trading communities. I think they're very useful. Like I can't see everything, but if I surround myself with 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 other super talented traders, we don't miss anything, right? So there's benefits to being in rooms. Plus, anybody who's got 10 years of experience or, who has done very well for themselves teaching and trading a particular style that kind of resonates with your personality. Um, yeah, I mean, they can definitely be better. I mean, free is not always best. I don't know. Where people think that that's necessarily like free can be fine, but is it going to be the best? I don't know that to be true. How many themes do I have on my watch list? Well, I see China's a theme with like Baba, PDD, Baidu, Billy, XPev, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that oil and gas is a theme right now, potentially. And that obviously I can list you all the names if need be. Gold is still a theme, although maybe just a touch extended in terms of price. Obviously quantum's a theme, nuclear is a theme, data centers are a theme. There's a lot of themes out there. How extended are some themes versus others, right? There's a lot of themes on my watch list. How many themes are buyable today? Well, not as many as you might think because some of them have already gone up quite a bit. No, I don't see a buy in Apple today. Right here was your buy. 919. For now, I don't see a buy. Here's the thing. The niche themes, it doesn't need to. Again, if you do your homework, you'll notice when IONQ broke out and when Rigetti broke out, like even if they weren't in the same, industry group, right? But they're still quantum, but different industry groups for whatever reason, the chart setups look identical for a reason. And all you have to do is, go on Finviz, go on their company website and realize that they both try to do quantum. I did Stockbee's boot camp. I was never in his room. I obviously like Mark, but it was more of an alert service. Dan Zanger was like a community, but it was that would do some teaching a little bit, not necessarily like any structured teaching, and was like a chat and, but it's just a good little community with obviously Dan Zanger, who's super brilliant. Pat, it's a Discord, and Pat does some good teaching on his watch list videos. and he always tries his best to help people. I mean, they're all really good. They're all super useful. Obviously, I think Mark's room's a bit on the pricey side, but that's just my opinion. Doesn't really matter. Some people find it super useful. I mean, you're dealing with one of the arguably one of the greatest ever recognized traders on earth. So it's like, he's charging you for what he thinks his worth is. And, if that happens to be $1,000 a month or, $500 a month or whatever it is, if you pay for the year, then, that's what it is. I talk about sizing, right? What do I mean by that? Can I give an example? Yeah. So for instance, obviously depending on a stock's average daily range, but what I mean by sizing, right, oftentimes comes down to how big my loss can be. I never even want my loss to be 1% of my portfolio, Because if a stock moves fairly slow, you might end up taking a 30%, 40%, 50% position of your portfolio to actually have a 1% loss at your stop level. So, and that's also what happens when something is tight. Typically, by size right, I mean take position size that would only allow you to take a 0.3% loss, roughly a third of 1%. And if you're dealing with stocks that move even 4% per day or 3% per day, call it 4%, that roughly allows you to take, if your stop is like 1 ADR or at the lows of the day, your stop might only be 2.5% from your entry. Well, if your stop is 2.5% from your entry and you take a position that's 10% of your portfolio, you're only risking a quarter of 1%. That's what I mean by size right, right? You have to know how much size you can take on the day you buy something, right? On the day you go to buy something based on where your stop level is going to be. So small little nuances, but that does take a little bit of figuring out to do, but you have to size right because you can't just size everything the same because some things move a little bit faster or some things are more or less liquid than others. If I had to pick one or two stocks in the software application sector, I mean, Palantir is one, I would believe. I don't know. Snowflake doesn't look all that bad either, but who knows? Maybe, I don't know if software application, if CrowdStrike and Zscaler are in there as well, but I don't know. It's a good question. None of them are on my radar for today. So how do I commit capital on trades with different prices based on risk and size position itself? Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it all comes down to what percent of your portfolio will you lose when you take a trade. Their prices make no difference, right? Like how much of if you have $100,000 account and a stock is, $1, which I wouldn't trade. Let's just call it $10. You can only buy 1,000 shares. If the stock is $100, right? You get the picture. You have to adjust your position sizing according, and if they both have the similar average daily range, they both have a similar percent stop loss, right? How many shares could you buy in a 100K account if you're putting in 10% of your portfolio? Thoughts on HUT? I hope HUT goes a little bit, a little bit more. We'll see if it can hold on to this 20-day. $32 maybe. I don't think it looks bad, but it's not a buy here. I tried buying HUT down here. Have I been in IONQ and IRON for a while? Yeah, 2 days. So not a long while, but 2 days. CoreWeave's still a little sloppy. I don't really see what to do with CoreWeave here. Yeah, AMD spends too much time under the 50-day. Yeah, we'll see if it can get going. Am I a country club guy now? I don't live in Michigan. I'm just going to play at a nice course. ANET looks fine, but ANET's a little bit slower too, and I just don't see the setup on this one yet. Looks fine, just doesn't look great. No, data is not parabolic. Strata, you're stuck on this market breadth thing today, dude. I don't know what's going on with you, man. What's your whole deal with market breadth? Who on X told you all this nonsense? I don't change my trading too much. I execute when my group and the market that I'm trading is going up. So if I'm looking at a gold name, I make sure gold's going up. If I'm looking at a tech name, I make sure the QQQ is going up. Um, no, I don't see the setup in Microsoft just yet. I don't see it. We'll see if this thing can get going over 518 soon. My extension rule is 7 times its average true range from the 50. I don't buy stocks more than 4 times. I have no idea. We could have just had a small correction here. So, like when you say, do I think we'll have a small correction here? We technically did just have a small correction. Right? This is a very small correction. Do I think it'll get a little bit bigger? Maybe. I think it's going to get choppy, is what I think. I think there's a chance that this market, can go a little bit higher, but I think it's going to get really choppy really soon. Extension from the 50s, you take its average true range, you divide it by the distance from the 50 simple moving average. I look at ATR over 20 days. It's sometimes accurate to the day, or within a few days, right? Or sometimes within a week if the group is big enough. And yeah, sometimes they all take off on the same day. And I've always talked about this before. I would go back and look at the energy stocks going into 2022. Look at the XLE, look at COP, look at DVN, look at Oxy, look at CVX, look at APA, look at FANG, look at all of them, and then look at how they set up going into 2022. Like go back on the daily chart and like look at it for like a month or two before 2022, and then look at it right before January 3rd. January 3rd was when I took my entry, and look at what they looked like going into that. And all of a sudden you'll be like, holy shit, he's right. These things really did look identical. So yeah, keep that in mind. Setups and themes kind of set up together. Oh, your dad's been moving into platinum lately? /PL. Let's take a peek. Holy cow, platinum's been on the move. Platinum futures. This just broke out of a massive base down here too in May. Holy cow, look at this giant base that was formed. I've been moving into platinum. It looks like he knows what he's doing. This is a massive base. We'll be watching to see if some names can reclaim. I will be watching still, like your Palantir. I'll still be watching, Tesla, and maybe this has a nice little bounce off the 10-day. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, guys, it is time to go. Running a couple minutes late. I appreciate you guys as always. Hopefully you guys have a nice, wonderful weekend. Trade them well today, and I will see you guys bright and early Monday morning. Cheers.